And hello, everybody. Welcome to Narrative Live on a Wednesday night, a special edition of the show on a Wednesday night at 7 p.m. Do you know where your democracy is tonight? Because there's a lot of news around the world about democracy under fire. We'll go through the news from Peru. We'll go through the news from Germany, plus all the latest from the investigations into Jan 6th and Mar-a-Lago. All of that is coming up on the show. Eric Garland was just here seconds ago, and then he disappeared on me. So he'll join us again in progress in just a few minutes, hopefully. Eric, please come back if you are able to. There has been a lot of news tonight, especially around the events in Germany that are fascinating to us because they are so similar to the things that we've been experiencing in the United States. And it certainly has never occurred to me that Germany would be one of these countries that would be facing an attack on its democracy, an attempted coup by a rogue group of individuals, 25 arrested around the country in Germany, all of them indicating that they were going to storm the Reichstag and absolutely take control of the government in an attempted coup. There are lots of interesting tangents that we can look at there and connect that to what we've been going through in the United States. So that's one of the big stories we'll be coming to tonight. And tonight, by the way, is the last show of the season, kinda, because there's going to be news in the next few weeks. So even though this isn't there won't be any more official shows. It looks to me like we're at least to do one more show around the 21st when the January 6th report comes out. Plus, the news does not stop these days. So we'll definitely bring you more news than just tonight's show. But tonight is the official last show of the season, and it's been a good one. We've had such an interesting year, talking about everything from the Dragon's Tail to look who's here. Eric's here. Hi, Eric. I think you're here. And I see you, but I do not hear you, Eric. I can divine things to you, but I can't. Can you hear me? You can hear me. No? I guess you can't hear me. Okay, well, there you go. I don't know why, Eric, just do this test on the air here while we can. I can hear you now. You there? I can't hear you.
Okay.
Can you hear me?
I'm here.
All right. Well, there you go. Nice to see you again, Eric. So this it's been a tumultuous day news-wise. We've been speaking about a little bit about what's coming up in the news in terms of Germany and Peru. We'll get into that in just a second. But we were also talking about tonight being the final show of the season, and there being it's been a good year. We've covered a lot of good stuff this year. And one of the things that I was going to bring up was the Dragon's Tail was the investigation into China, which, just a few months ago, I don't know if it was just our imagination, but it didn't seem to me like a lot of people were talking about China as the main threat to the United States. And suddenly, within 3 months of that story and that series breaking, or at least starting on narrative, there is a lot more attention to China. And of course, it's not us who's doing that. It's the fact that the world is paying attention. But it is interesting how much has changed in terms of just 90 days, how much the world has shifted from being focused on Ukraine and Russia to being much more focused on China. I hear you banging away at the desk there, so I can't imagine that's good news.
Yeah, I mean, and we really we can't take credit for it. Not when Xi Jinping is around. I mean, he's the driving force.
He sure is. That. But it is amazing how quickly the Biden administration has been able to shift the attention around where the world focus really should be. Just a few months ago, there was certainly not an awareness of the immediate threat that China poses to the world and to the United States and democracy in general. And now, when you look at the situation, the news is caught up. The focus of the administration seems far more on China than it was before, and that's just it's an indicator that even these little upstart news organizations like Narrative can, on occasion, be on the right story at the right time. It's nice to be like that every once in a while. So let's get into the news of the day, shall we? Which is all about the enemies of democracy. Go ahead. You want to jump in there? Is there a lag? I can't tell what's.
I'm still having trouble hearing.
You want to reconnect? I'll just keep. We'll take a commercial break and then we can come back and see if that helps. All right. Sorry about that, everyone. It seems these days there's a lot of technical issues. We will get back to Eric as soon as we come back from this commercial break. Don't forget to support our sponsors. They're very important to us at Narrative. Without them, we could not make the programming that we make for you on a regular basis. It's really important for our sponsors to be supported. So if you are interested in a domain name, boy, have I got a deal for you. Here is the team from Hover.
Hi there, it's Zev from Narrative. Have you ever had a great business idea but just didn't know where to start? Well, one of the first steps to building a new business is a domain name by Hover. That's because it's more important than ever to have an online presence, and your domain name by Hover is your first step in building your online brand. For a limited time at hover.com/reach, you get 10% off. Hover makes it quick and easy to find the perfect domain name for your business with over 400 available extensions. And with their Connect feature, you can easily connect your Hover domain name to many popular website builders with just a few clicks. Plus, Hover offers free Who Is Privacy. That's free Who Is Privacy that protects your personal information from being released online. Don't let the complicated search, sign up, and connection process of other domain providers stop you from starting your online brand today. Hover makes it easy to get started, so what are you waiting for? Find your perfect domain name at hover.com/reach. Plus, Narrative Live viewers get 10% off right now if you use the promo code REACH, that's REACH, or go to hover, hover.com/reach, REACH. They're a great company. They'll give you the 10% off, and it's a great place to get your domain name. That's hover.com/reach. So I'm going to turn to the chat a little bit here because I'm going to need some help in filling up the time here. You keep saying that Eric is freezing. If you're on YouTube, come onto the chat and let's take your questions from there as we figure out what's going on with Eric in the next few minutes here. But let's get to the news of the day, because there certainly was a fascinating turn of events in Germany today and in Peru. And we shall begin. Where shall we throw the dice first? Let's begin in Peru. Let's begin in Germany. Let me just get the setup in the way that makes sense here. So this was a surprise story certainly to me. I mean, it's occurred to me that QAnon has become an international thing. There are people around the world who believe in QAnon, but to imagine that there is a movement as sophisticated as the one that was stomped out in Germany today, where 25 people were accused of plotting a coup in Germany, of all places, one of the most stable democracies in the world. Boy, that begins to raise some interesting questions about the internationalization of QAnon and the whole extreme right that we've been experiencing here in the United States. Is it taking root in other countries? Now, the report itself was pretty stunning. We woke up this morning with news that 25 people had been arrested in 11 different states. There was a pretty broad nationwide hit that they'd taken, and over 11 different states, meaning that it was as broad and diverse as some of the January 6th arrests, which happened all around the country. These certainly seem to take place all around the German countries as well, which is an indicator of how widespread this movement was. Now, just reading here from the BBC, 25 people have been arrested and in raids across Germany. The group of far-right and ex-military figures, so this reminds us a lot of the Oath Keepers in many ways, have prepared for day X to storm the Reichstag parliamentary buildings and assume power. So the same kind of idea of what we went through in January the 6th happening in Germany, or certainly that was the plan, it seems, by this group of right-wing extremists and former military figures who planned on day X as the day they were going to attack the Reichstag. A man named Heinrich VIII, and this is a really interesting, 13, is really interesting that there's an aristocratic figure attached to this. We've long looked at the extreme far right here in the United States and wondered just where are they getting all this money from? And a lot of the time, the answer comes back to the monarchies, the aristocracies of the world. And here we see the first sign that I've seen in a long time that there is actually a member of a well-known family in Germany with royal roots. And he's declared himself Heinrich the 13th. And as part of their plan, we sort of reject the German state, or they were going to reject the German state and implement this sort of dictatorship in its place. And that is what they thought they were going to get away with. They were not obviously able to get away with it because their plot was stopped by the German police. They were able to arrest the 11 people in question, 25 people in question. But the similarities with the rest of the January the 6th movement certainly go quite deep and quite far. One of the things that really stuck out to me was a comment there by the Interior Minister, Nancy Fraser, I think is her name. She used a term which I had not heard very many other places except here on Narrative. The idea of the enemies of democracy. She said, we're going to respond with the full force of the law against the enemies of democracy. That's a term that we coined here on Narrative many years ago as a way to sort of catch all these different entities that were opposed to democracy into one catchphrase. Because, there's how do you take an aristocrat and a former paramilitary guy and maybe a neo-Nazi and a QAnon believer and somehow coin them into one term or fuse them into one term? It's very hard to do, except if you look at what they're trying to do as a political goal, which is end democracy. And it's really interesting to see the Nancy Fraser, the Interior Minister of Germany, using that term for the first time, as far as I can tell, in Germany to define or to describe this group of people that try to take over the Reichstag, or had planned to take over the Reichstag on day X, whenever that was going to be. So keep that term in mind as we continue to explore the various attacks on democracy that happen both in the United States and elsewhere around the world. There is definitely a considerable amount of growth in this movement around the world. So even though in the United States, maybe we've overcome the January 6th movement a little bit, we've sort of put it back in its place, it does not feel like that around the world, where there has been a continued growth of anti-democratic fervor. The other interesting thing, of course, in this report is news that the suspects came from the QAnon movement, or at least some of the people came from the QAnon movement, who believe their country is in the hands of a mythical deep state involving secret powers pulling political strings. Of course, the QAnon movement also goes into various other things like child abuse and human trafficking. But at its broad definition, that is accurate. That is about sort of this deep state that has the secret powers and are pulling political strings. Quite possibly, it exists. I've never been able to prove it, but quite possibly there are entities out there that are controlling the way the politics is working. It wouldn't surprise anyone that there'd be influences or forces outside of our traditional politics that are creating politics and that are creating winners and losers in politics. But the QAnon movement, of course, here in the United States is known for the human trafficking piece of it and the broad allegation that there's a lot of Democrats involved in this child abuse ring. None of that, of course, is true. I don't know how quickly or how deeply that has taken hold. That same kind of idea of a pedophile ring has taken hold in the German version of QAnon. But it is interesting to see that QAnon has arrived in Germany and is certainly already seems to be spawning these independent movements or these anti-government movements and this coup attempt, which seems to be underway. It goes on to say here that the Reichsbürger group aren't new. They predate the pandemic, which is interesting, but the audacious plot indicates increased commitment and radicalization, which could go hand in hand with the growth of the pandemic disinformation online. And that is interesting that these two different, this entity plus the entities that we've been talking about here, the various groups that are pushing for January the 6th, a lot of those groups all had to share this one common thread amongst them, which is the idea that the vaccines and the COVID-19 were really a way to control society, for there to be a control over humanity, and that the virus itself was designed as a way to get control over people and to force them to have their vaccines and whatever else, nanotechnology might be implanted in these vaccines or into your body when you take a vaccine, which could in fact ultimately, control your mind, or however these conspiracy theories go. They're very familiar to all of us now, but certainly that's the kind of stuff that we're very aware of in the United States and Canada. It's interesting to see that it's now arrived full force in in Germany, and making its appearance so well known. Interesting as well, in one of the posts, the social media posts that was put up by this group, they talk about a lot of other things that we've become familiar with, including the disinformation around the war in Ukraine. But also, they post about this idea of the sovereign citizens movement, which has become a feature here in the United States of this QAnon sovereign movement, where you've got sheriffs around the country saying that they're the ultimate authority in a particular country and that they do not have to recognize the federal rules. It's interesting to see that that is in fact one of the themes that is being picked up by the German version of our Jan 6 movement, our independent movements. So what's the takeaway from all of this? The takeaway is that there's too much here, in my opinion, too much similarities for that to just be a coincidence, that there is very likely the same kind of forces that are underpinning the January 6th movement in the United States to the same kind of forces that are underpinning the same thing in Germany. It just seems too coincidental if suddenly we had the same concerns around vaccines and sovereign citizens and this aristocratic sort of fervor and all this coup planning. That all seems too similar for it to be coming from different forces. It very likely is a result of the same kind of polarization and radicalization that we've seen in the United States and in Canada since 2016 and even before that, with Russian disinformation and Chinese disinformation, dividing a country, polarizing a country in order to create an environment where that country could then undergo some big political change. So that's the story out of Germany tonight. It's definitely worth keeping an eye on, because if there's a movement that they've been able to capture of 25 people, quite very likely there is many more people out there who believe in that. And if these people are already going kinetic, it means that there's many others who are quietly in agreement with them, which means there could be a minority of people in Germany that are, would not be unhappy if there was some sort of revolution, the same kind of numbers that we've seen here in the United States. Let's turn to Peru then, because this is breaking news this evening that just came out of Peru, and we're still following the developments out of Peru. But it's kind of fascinating to see how quickly and strongly that country has moved to protect its democracy. Earlier on today, the Peru's ousted now president, Pedro Castillo, was spotted at the police premises after he was arrested. He had been trying to make an escape to Mexico with his family and some belongings, which he had taken from the Peruvian state. And he had been attempting to dissolve Congress earlier on the day. So something happened along the way. In the morning, he woke up and decided he was going to dissolve Congress. Congress was not that appreciative of his attempt to dissolve them, and they landed up impeaching him. After they impeached him, he then, quickly tried to escape the country by driving in a small convoy to Mexico. But they did not let him get away. The lawmakers were able to get the police to stop him, and then he was supposedly taken into their custody. It's unclear if he was charged or arrested for anything. While all of that was going on, he was impeached by the Congress, and Dina Boluarte, who is a 60-year-old vice president of the country, was named the president of the country. So Peru now has a new leader, Dina Boluarte, who takes over from Pedro Castillo. The dramatic chain of events began with President Castillo giving an address to the national television in which he declared a state of emergency. He announced that he would dissolve the opposition-controlled Congress, a move which was met with shock in Peru and everywhere else around the world. Several ministers resigned in protest. The head of the Constitutional Court accused him of launching a coup d'etat. The United States strongly urged Mr. Castillo to reverse his decision, and Ms. Boluarte accused him of breaking the constitutional order. Peru's police and armed forces released a joint statement in which they said they respected the constitutional order, and then Mr. Castillo made the move to dissolve Congress just hours before it was due to start its fresh impeachment proceedings against him, the third time that Congress had tried to impeach him since he took office in 2021. It's a lot of impeachments in just over a year. he has accused those aiming to remove him from office of trying to undermine democracy. When in reality, it seems that democracy stood up quite well. This is the way democracy should, in fact, function. When you've got a president who's trying to assume power, who's trying to dissolve Congress and take power away from the people in an apparent coup d'etat, it's remarkable here that very peacefully the Congress was able to impeach him and replace him. And their institutions of democracy in Peru are obviously quite strong in order to be able to preserve this kind of order at this very chaotic time. In his televised address, he said, in response to citizens' demands throughout the length and breadth of the country, we have decided to establish an exceptional government aimed at re-establishing the rule of law and democracy. Well, yeah, that's never the case. So that's what's happening in Peru. Keep watching the story, because what we're seeing around the country is continued attempts to disrupt democracy. And whether you're seeing it in Germany and we're seeing it now in Peru, these things are happening everywhere. It's worth mentioning, while we're still on the democracy note here tonight, that the person of the year for Time magazine is Vladimir Zelensky. In the spirit of Ukraine, certainly it's been impressive the way the Ukrainians have been able to keep up an incredibly emboldened fight against the Russian invaders. And it's certainly, due to his leadership that they've been able to persevere to such great extent, but also their ability to be unified and positive in the face of terrible adversity. The Ukrainian people certainly deserve to be on the cover of Time magazine for the person of the year, and Volodymyr Zelensky certainly deserves a place of honor there as well. Well, we're just trying to give you some more details on the latest news. I think it's worth mentioning that there was an indictment today involving a very prominent Russian spy, a Russian intelligence asset. And the U.S. Department of Justice has decided to indict Andrei Derkash. And I'm not sure I'm saying his name correctly. It might be Derkash. But they've decided to indict him because he wants to live in the United States. The guy wants to buy homes in Beverly Hills, live the big life in the United States, having spent the last few years really trying to destroy America. You'll recall that in 2019 and 2020, during that election cycle, Derkash was involved in enormous amounts of attempts to introduce disinformation into the political system, especially around Hunter Biden. So just in the days after Twitter and Elon Musk published these so-called Twitter files, which have very little to do with news, but they claim there was some news in there, but there really wasn't, about how Twitter was handling the Hunter Biden allegations. Well, the guy who originally surfaced those allegations is a Ukrainian parliamentarian, or was a Ukrainian parliamentarian, but was also at the same time a Russian intelligence agent. Well, now he's been indicted. You might recall it was Andrei Derkash who was with Rudy Giuliani during those really unfortunate visits to Ukraine, where Giuliani could not make more of a mess of things for himself, and attempted to come up with various conspiracy theories to derail the Biden campaign. Well, this is the guy that organized that. He's very close to Putin. You can see there's a photograph of him in a huddle with Putin a few years ago. He claims, of course, not to be a Russian agent, but that's what one does, I guess, when you are a Russian agent. Well, now, by the way, he's also been tied to the Russian mafia, and has admitted on tape to killing a Ukrainian journalist, which is quite a stunning allegation. So there was a 7-count indictment unsealed today in federal court in Brooklyn, charging Andrei Derkash with a conspiracy to violate the International Emergency Economic Powers Act. IEPA is how you say that, I guess. IEEPA, IEPA. Bank fraud conspiracy, money laundering conspiracy, and 4 counts of money laundering in connection with the purchase and maintenance of 2 condos in Beverly Hills, California. Derkash allegedly purchased the properties in violation of new U.S. sanctions imposed earlier this year and concealed his interests in the transactions. So he is on a sanctions list. You're not meant to be allowed to buy fancy properties in Beverly Hills, but somehow Derkash was able to do that using various other mechanisms to pay for the properties, the 2 condominiums, and clearly he's not going to be allowed to do that. Now, he's still at large. He's been indicted, and I don't suspect he's going to come back to the United States, if he is in fact in the United States, because who wants to face those kinds of charges? Breon Peace, who's the United States Attorney for the Eastern District of New York, Michael J. Driscoll, an Assistant Director in charge of Federal Bureau of Investigations of the New York Field Office, and Andrew Adams, the Director of the Task Force of the Klepto Capture Unit. You know about the Klepto Capture Unit. That's the unit that's been set up in order to catch all these oligarchs and their in their money laundering and other efforts. This is a good quote. The conduct of this Kremlin asset, who was sanctioned for trying to poison our democracy, has shown he is ready, willing, and capable of exploiting the banking system in order to advance his illicit goals. The US will not be a safe haven where criminals, oligarchs, and sanctioned entities can hide their ill-gotten gains or influence our elections. States, that's according to the USA attorney, Breon Peace. This office, together with our law enforcement partners, will use every tool available to prosecute those who evade sanctions and abuse the U.S. financial systems, and will identify, freeze, and seize criminal proceeds wherever and whenever possible. Now, it is interesting that this is the guy who is pushing the Hunter Biden claims. There are many Hunter Biden claims, as you'll recall, some involving China, some involving Ukraine, and also, of course, the sexual allegations. So, yeah, that's interesting that he has been indicted, and it's interesting that the timing happens so soon after Twitter. I'm here on chat on YouTube. I hope you can see the chat. I am happy to take any questions. If you guys have anything to ask, feel free to ask there. I don't see anyone talking there, but let me make sure that it works. And I'll also check out the Twitter chat in just a few minutes. Don't know what happened to Eric. I guess Eric won't be returning for tonight's show. Sad as that may be, it means I've got to talk for another little bit of time here. And I've got things to share with you, some pretty big things to share with you. So stick around. Let's turn to domestic news if we can right now. Jack Smith, this guy, I swear, he looks like the character from The Matrix, doesn't he? Doesn't look like that character from The Matrix. Can't remember the guy's name. Mr. Smith, I guess, is the name in The Matrix. He just looks like, you don't want to run into him, and he's pretty scary looking. But in a good way, in a peaceful, honorable way, which is what people say is true about Jack Smith. Now, you'll recall that yesterday there was a lot of news around the fact that he had issued subpoenas to various state officials because he was asking them to hand over their communication records with Donald Trump's inner circle. This is really important, big news, because it means that he's focusing in on that part of the January 6th conspiracy, which involved the submission of fake slates of electors from different states, particularly 4 states, in an attempt to overturn the election results in 2020. So, he has got already the phone records of many of the people that he has been asking about who are in the Trump inner circle. But now he's asking for the same thing from the other side, from the local and state officials, whether that's to see if they corroborate each other or whether it's to see if, some details must be missing. It's hard to tell. But Jack Smith is certainly, not shying away from taking direct aim at one of the key aspects of the January the 6th conspiracy, the fake slate of electors. Here are the names, by the way. I found this really interesting, reading the actual documents. These are the many names that they are looking for details around the communications of. And I'll pull them up here so you can see them. Kenneth Cheeseborough, I guess is how you say his name. And Kenneth is one of those lawyers that were involved with John Eastman and company. Justin Clark is another one of those lawyers. Joe DeGeneva, he's another one of these sort of weird conspiracy theorist guys that has been around since Clinton Lewinsky days. That's how long he's been pushing all these weird conspiracy theories, and he's certainly one of the people that is now in the target, it looks like, of the new special counsel just recently appointed to investigate January the 6th and Mar-a-Lago. John Eastman, he's really the architect of the entire January the 6th plan, if you will, the conspiracy to overthrow the election results on that day. Jenna Ellis, of course, you'll remember, is the lawyer who represented Donald Trump and worked a lot with Rudy Giuliani and Sidney Powell. Boris Epstein is an interesting character because Boris Epstein is, of course, a Russian asset as well, many of us believe at least. And his involvement in everything related to Donald Trump since 2016. He's very questionable, but it's interesting that he is one of the people that they're looking for information here because, as we pointed out on Twitter the other day, there's this really strange email that Boris Epstein was sent from Jack Walenchik a while ago. This would be 2020 on December the 8th, so just about a month before the January the 6th event. In it, he describes what will be a broad attempt to overthrow the government based on these false slate of electors. So I just talked to the gentleman who did that memo, Ken Cheeseborough. His idea is basically that all of us, that's Georgia, Wisconsin, Arizona, Pennsylvania, etc., have our electors send in their votes, even though the votes aren't legal under federal law because they're not signed by the governors of each of those states, so that members of Congress can fight about whether they should be counted on in terms of whether they're acceptable for that vote that day. That will create a wild scene in where they'll be able to negotiate some sort of stalemate and then postpone the actual certification of the votes. My comment to him was that I guess there's no harm in it, legally at least. Of course, there is harm legally, it seems now. We would be sending in the fake electors' votes to Pence so that someone in Congress can make an objection when they start counting votes and start arguing that the fake votes should be counted. So this was published in the Washington Post and released by the committee, the January 6th committee, a few months ago. It caught our eye here at Narrative because of its so explicit in how it explains what's going to happen on January the 6th. And this certainly, if you're looking to prove a conspiracy, is the kind of document you would look for to prove that there was foresight and planning related to an event like January the 6th. And clearly, that's what they've done here. So that's why Boris Epstein's name is clearly there, and there's probably why Kenneth Cheeseborough's name is also there. Also on this list, Rudy Giuliani, of course, got to be on that list. The former FBI commissioner of, the New York Police Department Commissioner Bernard Kerik is there. Bruce Marks, Cleta Mitchell, another name we've discussed at length here, who was the conduit between a lot of the funders of January the 6th and the actual organizers of January the 6th through the Council for National Policy and others. So Cleta Mitchell, certainly an interesting target there, very close to Jeannie Thomas, the wife of the Supreme Court Justice. Then there's Matthew Morgan, Kurt Olson, and William Olson, of the Olson family, very supportive of these kind of efforts around the United States. And the list goes on. Sidney Powell's there. Victoria Toensing is there. She, I believe, actually, I'm not sure what I was about to say about her, but Victoria Toensing is there. And so is L. Lynn Wood, very controversial lawyer of Donald Trump. So, not that he's saying in these requests that he is focused on investigating these people in particular, but it does give you that indication that he's certainly looking at these people and wants to know why they were talking to various state officials. So it's not a list of people you'd want to be on, certainly not in the week after this supposed very dogged special counsel is appointed. So we'll be watching this with great interest, as we will the other thing that Jack Smith is focusing on very, very closely, which is the Mar-a-Lago investigation. And there was news today there as well, where apparently, even after they'd asked him several times whether he had any more of these classified documents, he kept denying it. The lawyers kept denying it. But Donald Trump still had various documents in various places, including Trump Tower, and also now it turns out in a storage facility, sort of storage locker. It contained 2 documents marked classified, and he was able to keep them there right to the very end. And he needs to hire a separate company to conduct a search of that storage locker and other facilities in order to make sure that there weren't any other documents that had been squirreled away. So, can you imagine a classified document being put in a storage locker off-site, not even close to where the former president was living? It's just remarkable that's what's going on in this day and age. And we know what he did with them, some of those classified documents. Of course, we've been reporting here on Narrative that some of those documents were marketed on the world stage to other foreign leaders in an attempt to keep these to make some money or to profit off these, or to at least hurt some of the United States intelligence operations around the world. So this case is not going away. And again, it's another indicator, this leak today, that Jack Smith is taking his job very seriously and targeting both the January the 6th events and also the events of Mar-a-Lago and the documents theft, taking those very, very seriously. I have just a few more minutes here where I can keep talking, because otherwise I'm going to just run out of ability to talk. It's a lot to talk about one day. But I do want to share with you a couple of things that are happening at Narrative over the next few months, because this is our last episode of this season, which means we'll be back only around January the 13th or somewhere around there, maybe sooner if it's necessary. But the reason we're taking this little time out is because we're working on our next big, and this time it's really, really big, scripted serial. You remember we did The Dragon's Tail in this last season, which looked at the untold story of China's war on U.S. democracy. Well, we're following that up because as I was researching this really interesting story about the Murdochs in particular and about their involvement with the Kushners, I found myself in a tangent, into a bit of a historic tangent, and that led me to a really interesting discovery. And we will be detailing all of it. I'm trying to be as coy about this as I can right now because I don't want to give it away. But there will be a real expose over 6 or 7 weeks. We'll be exposing probably one of the biggest scandals in intelligence history. I'll just put it that way. And that's going to be in a very, very exciting series of episodes that will be scripted this time and available to subscribers. And here's the trailer for what we're planning to do. Gives you a little bit of a giveaway of where we're intending to go. Well, that's the name, a Murdoch mystery. It's taken off, of course, that idea of the Murdoch Mysteries, which is a famous Canadian and British TV show, I think. Why are we doing a show about Murdoch? Well, we discovered as we were doing our initial investigation into The Dragon's Tail that Murdoch's involvement with China was so interesting and so fascinating. And then the more we dug into it, the more we could see that he was involved in some other things. And so we couldn't resist investigating this further. And it turned out to be relevant to one of the biggest scandals ever in the intelligence history, the modern day intelligence history. It's going to be a gripping series. We're calling it the Murdoch Mystery as a trial name by now. It might change its name by the time it gets to the air. But I hope you'll join us from February. But it's one of the reasons that the show takes a little break here as I write some of this content for the next season. That's why we're doing it. And it's also one of the reasons that I have to keep emphasizing that we desperately do need you to continue to support us at patreon.com/narrative. We're so thankful to everybody who's come out and supported us over the years. There's thousands of you who've, over the 5 or 6 years that we've been on Patreon, have really supported our coverage and our independent reporting. There's no doubt that some of the reporting we've done has dramatically moved the dial, has dramatically changed the narrative on so many events. We discussed, the thing we spoke about China earlier on is one of the interesting positives that have happened in the last year. But whether it's the coronavirus coverage that we did years ago or the coverage of Trump-Russia initially, none of that coverage would have gotten to air if it weren't for your incredible support. So it takes a lot of money to spend, and it takes a lot of effort and courage and inspiration to spend your hard-earned money on an independent news organization like ours. And we hope that the money you are sending us is well worth it, because it sure is for us. And we're hopefully delivering the kind of content, the kind of news stories that really make a difference to the fight for democracy and the fight against autocracy. That's been our main goal since we started in 2016 and continues to be our goal today. There are many stories that we have brought to light that would not have come to light if it weren't for your support. So our thanks to you. And please, if you are able to, go to patreon.com/narrative. That's patreon.com/narrative. And help us to continue the work that's so important right now to protect democracy around the world. Just in tonight's show, we've covered the events of Germany and the events of Peru. You can see that democracy is certainly still under attack around the world, and it's certainly still under attack in the United States. We're fooling ourselves if we believe that, just because we've had a successful midterms and Democrats have pushed back some of the Republican advances, that it's all over. It certainly isn't. We still see the same foreign powers trying to exert their influence and exert their pressure on the United States. We've seen just in the last few months, a radical growth in Chinese espionage activity in the United States, and also an uptick in the amount of money Russia is spending on disinformation efforts in the United States. That is exactly how we got QAnon in the first place, through those kind of disinformation efforts by China and Russia. And certainly now it's evident that it's taken over the parts of the entire world. And that means that the war against autocracy continues, and it's going to be a global fight. And until we're absolutely certain that they've backed down from their attacks on the way we choose to govern ourselves, this war ain't over. So patreon.com/narrative. Support Narrative, because we need to make this great new show that we're so excited about. You're going to love the details that we get on the story that many of you have heard in different ways over the years. I've had so many questions about this one particular scandal that has affected the intelligence community. I can't give you the name now because it'll be giving away too much. But that scandal I've constantly get questioned about, because it's one of these underpinning scandals that changes a 50-year narrative. Everything that basically, I can tell you that it starts at Iran-Contra, which many of you are aware is sort of the lightning rod of everything that's happened in the 5 decades since, in terms of the intelligence operations around the world, the attacks on democracy, and even the installation of Donald Trump as a president. None of that would have happened if it weren't for the events of Iran-Contra. And so this particular story is going to be a lot about that, and also about Rupert Murdoch, as you can plainly tell. So here's another look at the trailer, and then I'll be right back with a final goodbye. All right, that's the Murdoch mystery. It's coming up in February right here on Narrative. And again, patreon.com/narrative is where you can go to help us produce that content, to become a producer on Narrative, and to help us make some of these stories that are so important to democracy come to light. We can't leave the show tonight without discussing what happened in Georgia. What a remarkable turn of events as Warnock is able to secure the 51st Senate seat for the Democrats. That is going to make such a huge difference to everyone in the Democratic Party, but also everyone in America, simply because it's no longer going to be that big an obstacle to get things through the Senate as it has been in the past 2 years for Joe Biden. So we're looking at a huge expansion potentially of the Biden agenda, which would be so good for Americans in general. It also just is the birth of a political star. I mean, I know he's been on the American stage for a couple of years now, but Warnock is becoming one of those people that people are openly discussing about being a future presidential candidate. He certainly has been able to do remarkable things in a state where remarkable things are hard to do. This is still very much a purple state, and for Raphael Warnock to be able to win now 4 elections in a row and do it so with such grace and such elegance and a remarkable address at the end, he really is a true figure of leadership and prominence, that we could see him really be the next potential leading candidate for the presidency out of the Democratic Party. Certainly not in 2024, but certainly into 28. and that'll be interesting. It'll set up an interesting dynamic. I'm sort of scared to start discussing that particular election because who wants to start prognosticating about the next presidential elections? But certainly he is one of the people that we need to be watching. The other person, of course, is Pete Buttigieg. We're still very impressed by his performance over at the Department of Transportation, and there's very many others that we're still not haven't quite taken their public positions yet. But there are, the Commerce Secretary comes to mind. There are other people that are, beginning to build an incredible body of work and reason for them to be running in the next presidential elections. So. Raphael Warnock achieved a miracle. Now 4 elections in a row in a state where it's not so easy for Democrats to win. It just isn't. I mean, look at the way Kemp was able to hold on to his governorship there with his victory there. It's remarkable then to know that same electorate is able to support Warnock. And clearly the reasoning behind his success has to do a lot with the frustration around the Democrats. I mean, there's just, it's not, maybe not with the Democrats in general, but the Democrat candidate, Herschel Walker was clearly unfit for the task. And I think people were unenthusiastic about going to vote for that candidate, especially as it was in this case, the second time they were forced to do so. And there was a report out of the New York Times today, and I'll just put this up for you guys to see, that in fact it was that enthusiasm that gave Warnock such a tremendous opportunity there to win that Senate seat. So you can see here that the drop in Republican turnout was a big factor in electing Warnock. Turnout was somewhat lower in Tuesday's runoff than in the November general election by about 400,000 voters, but Raphael Warnock more than doubled his lead over Republican Herschel Walker. The Democrat led by about 95,000 votes as of Wednesday, beating his 37,000 vote margin in the general election. Now, there was one less candidate, of course. The Libertarian candidate was not running in this particular case, but you've now got an expansion from 37,000 to 95,000 in terms of a lead. That is pretty remarkable for Raphael Warnock. And it is pretty remarkable for all of us because it means that we get 51 senators and Joe Biden gets a much easier path to passing legislation. Now, that is not necessarily the case in the House, where, as you know, the Republicans are still look likely to be the eventual winners there. And it certainly seems likely that, Kevin McCarthy might still become the Speaker of the House, although there's certainly many weeks now, I think 3 weeks before we get into that decision. And if he cannot muster 218 votes from his very shrunken majority that he has in the House there, it could be that we're looking at a national unity figure as a new Speaker of the House. And if I had my druthers, I'd say that that's exactly where we're going. So, whether it's Kinzinger, the former Republican congressman, comes up, that might be someone you'll see as a potential candidate for being the Speaker of the House. But it could, of course, be anybody. Oprah Winfrey could be the Speaker of the House. Obama could be the Speaker of the House. You do not have to have one elected office to be the Speaker of the House. It could be absolutely anybody. And wouldn't that be radical if they chose someone that was, out of left field? Maybe Obama does want it. Maybe he's interested in being the Speaker. If he is the Speaker, by the way, if he's appointed Speaker, then it's because of the curiosity of this particular succession law. He can become president again if the vice president and the president are no longer able to do their job. Then the Speaker would then assume the presidency, and it's only in that case that you can have a third term president. And in this case, it would be really fascinating if Barack Obama had an opportunity to be another term in the White House. Maybe even Michelle Obama could run. Who knows? There's so many other names you could throw out there as possible names to succeed Kevin McCarthy, or at least Nancy Pelosi, in that speakership of the House. Certainly interesting times in politics, and we'll keep watching that in the new year. With that, I want to wish you all a very, very happy holiday season. It's been a tremendous honor and a thrill, as always, to be with you for yet another year here on Narrative. We take this work very seriously. It takes hours and hours of research preparation and all sorts of things to make sure that you get the right information, that it's all fact-checked, and that you are able to walk away from these shows with factual information, true information that is able to protect democracy and also able to inspire you to take the right kinds of actions, no matter whether you're taking it by supporting your local officials or whether you're taking it by running in office or whatever it is that you might be doing. It's so important that we provide you the accurate information, as we have now done for 6 years, to be able to inspire the right kind of decision making by American citizens, so they can make the right choices for their own lives and their own families. It's what it comes down to at the end of the day. If you're watching on YouTube, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. I think if you subscribe now, you might even become our 4,000th subscriber. So subscribe to the channel. Don't forget there's a little notification alarm looking thing. Click on that, because that way it will remind you every time we're on the air. If you're watching this on Twitter, don't forget to follow the Twitter account at Zev Shalev or at Eric Garland. And you'll also follow at Narrative TV, N-A-R-A-T-I-V. And if you're watching on podcasts, which Apple Podcasts carries our video podcast, don't forget to follow, rate, and share our programming. It's really important for us to do that in order to keep our awareness up. So check us out on the podcast. That's Apple Podcasts provides a video feed and an audio feed of our show. So make sure that you subscribe to both if you can. And of course, we're also available on Spotify and various other places. I will be back in early January with a lot more of Narrative TV, but I guarantee you I'll be back even well before that, because there seems to be lots of news happening in the final run up here to the holiday season. So look out for us on the 21st when we'll be doing coverage of the January 6th report, but there'll be many other times we'll be dropping in for the news. Plus, next week on Tuesday or Wednesday, we'll do a rerun episode, and we'll do one of those every week until we're back on January the 6th. On that note, wishing you and your families a very happy, healthy, and prosperous time over the holidays. Hope you get all the best gifts ever. And hope you're ready for another big year where we'll be, advancing the fight for democracy and taking on autocracy around the world, making sure that, people still have a say in politics, people still have a vote in their future, and can still live the American dream. On that note, for Eric Garland and me, Zev Shalev, we wish you a very good night. We'll see you again soon.
One day you'll tell the story of autocrats, crooks, and kings who came for our freedom. A story of citizens who stood up to tyranny and won. The people prevailed and renewed an old vow to a more perfect union. And that was just the beginning. The story continues. Narrative, where truth lives.
Hi there, it's Zev from Narrative. Have you ever had a great business idea but just didn't know where to start? Well, one of the first steps to building a new business is a domain name by Hover. That's because it's more important than ever to have an online presence, and your domain name by Hover is your first step in building your online brand. For a limited time at hover.com/reach, you get 10% off. Hover makes it quick and easy to find the perfect domain name for your business with over 400 available extensions. And with their Connect feature, you can easily connect your Hover domain name to many popular website builders with just a few clicks. Plus, Hover offers free Who Is Privacy. That's free Who Is Privacy that protects your personal information from being released online. Don't let the complicated search, sign up, and connection process of other domain providers stop you from starting your online brand today. Hover makes it easy to get started, so what are you waiting for? Find your perfect domain name at hover.com/reach. Plus, Narrative Live viewers get 10% off right now if you use the promo code REACH, that's REACH, or go to hover, hover.com/reach, REACH. Every minute of Narrative's reporting, every story that we break is made possible by our patrons. You too can become a patron by joining at patreon.com/narrative.
Narrative, where truth lives.